Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into this, because today we are going to completely reframe something that you might have spent your entire life apologizing for. Seriously, if you're naturally a quiet person, society is constantly telling you to speak up, be a little louder, or put yourself out there more. But what if your quiet nature isn't actually a flaw at all? What if instead it's a literal psychological superpower? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the hidden psychology of the observer's mind. We're going to decode the science behind exactly why you process the world the way you do. So tell me if this sounds familiar. Have you ever been asked, why are you so quiet? Or maybe you get its annoying cousin, hey, is everything okay? Picture it. You're sitting in a room full of people, right? Everyone is talking, laughing, constantly competing for attention, and then, boom, someone points this question right at you. It is such an incredibly relatable, often anxiety-inducing moment. You're just sitting there happily taking it all in, and suddenly you're put on the spot, as if your silence is some kind of problem that urgently needs to be solved. All right, let's break this down in Section 1, the misunderstood silence. Okay, the absolute biggest societal myth we need to bust right here, right now, is the idea that silence equals shyness, or that being quiet means you just don't have anything to say. I mean, there is a massive difference between what people assume on the outside and what's actually happening on the inside. On the outside, yeah, people might look at you and see someone who appears, well, blank or indecisive. But internally, internally, your brain is running a high-speed processing and decoding marathon. You aren't just sitting there doing nothing, you are working. While everyone else is busy projecting their own voices into the room, your brain is actively pulling data and decoding the entire environment. You're working. I really want you to internalize this point because it's absolutely crucial that silence isn't a sign that you're shy or that you have nothing to say. Actually, psychological research points out that this specific kind of silent observation is one of the clearest indicators of high intelligence and a deeply complex mind. You aren't lacking words at all. Your brain is just operating on a frequency that most loud talkers don't even know exist. Moving right along to Section 2, the art of active observation. So, let's look at the specific psychological mechanics here. What is your quiet mind actually doing while everybody else is fighting for their turn to speak? Psychologists call this active observation. It's basically the practice of listening and noticing the really subtle details. You're gathering data on the atmosphere, the subtext, rather than just trying to dominate the conversation. See, the smartest people in the room rarely feel the need to actually dominate it. Instead, they prioritize gathering data. They want to see the whole puzzle before they even think about putting a piece down. Think about what kind of data you're actually gathering. Think back to the last time you were at a busy dinner party or a chaotic meeting. While others were literally just holding their breath, waiting for their turn to talk, you were picking up on the hidden stuff. A slight change in someone's tone of voice, a split-second flicker of emotion on a face all the way across the table, maybe the underlying glaring flaws in the logic of somebody's argument. Your brain acts like a giant sponge for the invisible, unsaid dynamics of the room. Which brings us nicely to Section 3, decoding cognitive complexity. Now, why does your brain actively reject those shallow interactions in favor of deep, continuous analysis? Well, it comes down to a concept called cognitive complexity. This is your natural psychological tendency to examine literally every angle of a situation before you choose to contribute. This right here is why you wait to speak. To someone on the outside, your hesitation might look like you're confused or don't know the answer. But actually, scratch that, you aren't indecisive at all. You are just flat out refusing to give a shallow, half-baked answer. You're turning the problem over and over in your head, looking for genuine depth. And because your brain is hardwired for that kind of depth, we arrive at this absolute universal truth for observers. Surface-level small talk is mentally draining. Look, if you find small talk exhausting, I want to reassure you right now, you are not being antisocial. Not at all. It's simply that if a conversation is stuck on, the weather or meaningless office gossip, your brain finds it genuinely draining. You are biologically wired to save your mental battery for topics that are actually complex, nuanced, and, well, interesting. Let's dig into where this comes from. In Section 4, the origins of awareness. So, where does this incredibly powerful, albeit exhausting, brilliant skill even come from? How do you develop such a finely tuned radar for the world? Well, for many highly observant people, this trait is heavily linked to how they grew up. It often happens in steps. Step 1, growing up a little too fast. Step 2, developing hyper-awareness as a literal survival tool. If you had to navigate unpredictable or stressful environments as a kid, You had to learn how to sense shifts in mood or anticipate problems before they even happened, just to keep yourself safe. And that brings us to step 3. As an adult, that childhood survival tool transforms into a profound, highly developed emotional awareness. And in the real world, this translates into everyday superpowers, like noticing the sudden distance in a friend's voice way before anyone else admits it's even there. You can read pauses, hesitations, and tiny behavioral changes with just incredible accuracy. You hear what people aren't saying, which honestly is usually way more important than the words coming out of their mouths. Okay, let's pull this all together in section 5, your quiet superpower. Because you spend all this time in observer mode, you end up constructing a magnificent inner world. Psychologists note that people who observe more tend to develop some pretty distinct traits. We're talking a far richer imagination, a much sharper intuition, and a significantly deeper level of self-awareness. You aren't just passively letting the world pass you by. You are constantly building, cataloging, and organizing a massive internal library of insights. When you compare these two states of being side by side, it perfectly explains what happens when you finally do decide to share those insights. Everyone else is just talking, but you are doing the incredibly hard work of thinking. This is exactly why, when you finally speak up, people are consistently caught off guard by the profound clarity and the sheer depth of your words. You've already processed the logic, the tone, the entire context, all while everyone else was busy just making noise. So if you take nothing else away from this explainer, make it this: value truth over noise. The next time you're sitting there feeling weird or totally out of place for being the quietest person in the room, just remember that your silent observation is not a social flaw, not even close. It is the active, deliberate choice of a highly functioning mind. You are observing, processing, and understanding the world in a way that the loud talkers will simply always miss. I want to leave you with a provocative thought to carry with you right now. What truth will you discover in the noise today? Your mind works in a way that most people aren't taught to understand, but those little quirks are undeniably your greatest strengths. So keep relying on that intuition, keep building out that incredible inner library, and please, never apologize for the brilliant, quiet work your mind is doing. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the fascinating psychology of your own unique mind.